make sure you guys are okay with recording. So looks like we are recording here. All right, so I'm going to present. Okay, can you guys see that on the screen?
Yep.
Okay. Now, there's a way where you can do a split screen. All right, so you could put, you can have the notes up here and your guided notes that I sent out this morning to fill out. All right. So can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So like I said, this is what I'm going to do with these. I'm always going to have like the chapter title there. I'm going to have like kind of the section that we're covering. All right. So chapter 1 is titled The First Humans. All right. Prehistory to 3500 BC. And I'm going to give you guys a kind of a notes that you don't have to print out or nothing like that. It's just kind of a handout on certain what we call chronological terms based on time. If you had a history class like U.S. history last year, a lot of seniors, or if you had something in junior high with American history, you didn't really deal with a lot of what we refer, the two big kind of chronological terms that you'll see in world history here are BC and AD. All right, so BC stands for, and it's a Christian-centric model of keeping track of time. BC stands for before Christ. All right, so when we say 3,500 years, when we say 3,500 BC, that's 3,500 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. All right, now the other one that's used is AD, which a lot of people think is after death. And that's a misconception. It's actually a Latin term, Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord, which is basically connotates the time period when Jesus was born. So technically it is 2020, right? We are actually AD 2020, which is AD 2020 years since the birth of Jesus. This was something that was established officially in the 16th century by the Catholic Church. If we watch videos or kind of like have other worksheets, a lot of times you'll see the terms replaced with BCE, which replaces BC, which stands for before Common Era, and then CE, which would be Common Era, which replaces AD. But our textbook keeps it at BC and AD. All right, and so BC essentially counts down, AD counts up. So if it's something that's like, let's say 2000 BC, 2000 BC is event is older than, let's say, something that was 6 BC. All right, AD, it's the opposite. It gets a little confusing. All right, and there'll be some worksheets where you may have some questions on that, but I'll give you a handout to help you out here. All right, so what we did the past couple days that we had met here, we did that kind of like prehistory worksheet and stuff. All right, and so we were talking about the story of the Iceman, if you will. All right, so in a sense here, what the first chapter is basically is the study of prehistory. All right, now you guys didn't sign up for prehistory, you signed up for world history, but there's a difference between the two. All right, prehistory is essentially the study of the past prior to the development of written records. History is basically based on written records. That's the key kind of component there. Both of them are studying events in the past, but it's what you're studying to develop a story that is a little bit different. All right, so when you guys took U.S. history last year, if you guys took U.S. history last year, we had a little bit more insight on, let's say, what the founding fathers, who kind of basically had in mind when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, right? You guys had an idea on in U.S. history, like, maybe like what the Emancipation Proclamation was stating. All right, history, basically, you have a little bit of a fuller story when studying history. Not to say that it can't be what we classify as manipulated or biased, if you will. I always told classes that if you studied, hello, that if you were studying, hey, how's it going? Yeah, can you switch that? You can switch that out.
Yeah, I can take a look at it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that, guys. So, like in history, if history can still be manipulated, if you were studying the kind of the presidency of, let's say, Barack Obama, and all you got from history was something like Fox News, you would think that he's Satan. If you were studying the history of, let's say, the presidency of George W. Bush, all you got was something from MSNBC, you would think that he was evil or Satan. All right, history can be manipulated, but it tells a little bit fuller story. Prehistory is a little bit more difficult, though. All right, so in prehistory, you're primarily dealing with the study of essentially fossils and artifacts. So fossils are the remains of living organisms, bones primarily, right? But anything that was living, you could plants, things of that nature. Artifacts are things that were shaped by people, right? Like in the story of Utsi, the Iceman, which we did. The kind of the fossil obviously would be his remains, all right? Artifacts would be the quill, the rucksack, the robe that he left behind. All right. Now, you guys were kind of dealing with prehistory in a way, even though you had written strips, written statements, you were dealing with basically limited information. All right. And so you were kind of formulating a story with those artifacts. All right. And we had different stories, right? People had different kind of conclusions, if you will. And the same thing with those who study kind of fossils and artifacts, particularly artifacts, and the idea that they whatever they find, a lot of times they have to fill in the blanks, if you will. All right. And so like an example here, fossils, obviously kind of remains here. Artifacts, like for example, these were artifacts that were found around 1,000, around 80, 1,000 in North America. These were found in what we have native population. All right, you see the types of tools that are being used, the adazes, the axes. So with the conclusion, they had the idea that they were engaged in farming. Even like this item right here, this is referred to as a chunky stone at Cahokia, right up this, at Cahokia Mounds, you would find these. These were basically kind of like used as almost like lawn bowling, if you will, kind of recreational. So when they find these items, usually they believe that these are civilizations that have time for recreational activities. All right, they're somewhat advanced, if you will. The types of kind of food that they used, it's a kind of weaponry. Around the same time, these were artifacts that were discovered in what is Ireland, around 1,000, and what had previously been a Viking settlement. All right. And so the types of tools are kind of like, items that are used, more metals. All right. They said this is definitely kind of like an Iron Age culture, if you will. There was an emphasis a little bit more on kind of warfare. And you see the types of tools and weapons that were kind of used. So these are found roughly at the same time, different parts of the world, and they kind of tell two different stories of the trajectory of certain civilizations. But doesn't tell the full story. Like this right up here. This is kind of a misconception here when we talk about Vikings. Like having like horned helmets and stuff like that. No, Vikings didn't go into battle with these horned helmets. It was later kind of discovered. Although these were kind of like used as props in a Wagner opera. These were probably used for religious ceremonies. So again, the use of like kind of religious items used for religious ceremonies indicates this type of civilization believes in kind of a certain kind of belief system, if you will. All right, so these are examples of artifacts, and artifacts can tell a story, but they may not always tell a complete story. Now, those who are dealing with the use of kind of artifacts and fossils tend to be broken into kind of two groups. All right, archaeologists are the ones who generally kind of study the material remains. All right. And then anthropologists. These are the ones that are kind of filling in the blanks. You guys were kind of doing more of what we would call anthropology. You were given 8 strips. You were given 8 statements to formulate your story on the Iceman, starting with the title. Some of you guys had said that he weighed 110 pounds. Some said that the rucksack that he was carrying weighed 110 pounds. Some said the fur coat. All right, all made sense, right? To essentially, however, when you read the full story that I sent out yesterday, found out that he was the one who weighed 110 pounds. But they're all legitimately like kind of good theories or hypotheses. All right, and in many cases, stories change over time. All right. Particularly like with archaeologists, like most famous group of archaeologists would be like paleoarchaeologists, right? Paleoarchaeology is primarily dealing with dinosaurs. right? If you were a little kid, you're probably, a lot of little kids are fascinated by dinosaurs. My kids when they were little, all right? The whole story, particularly like the story of the Brontosaurus, which they believe now, as time changes, may have been two separate dinosaurs, all right? So while you have this information in front of you, sometimes the kind of conclusions can change over time. All right. Am I moving too fast for you guys? Are you guys getting these? Is anybody there? Okay. I can't see. Normally when you guys are in class, I can see who's falling asleep. Here I can't. So I'm just assuming most people are sleeping. All right. I was going to show you this video here on ways of kind of trying to kind of date particularly items like artifacts and fossils and stuff like that, but it won't play because we're on a Google thing. But what it was essentially talking about is C14 or radiocarbon dating. All right. And you guys may have talked about this in a biology class here. All right. This is something that was developed in the 1940s, which gives us a little bit more of an idea on the dating of particular materials like artifacts and fossils. All right. This was developed actually at the University of Chicago. A guy named Willard Libby was the guy who was heading the group. And so what it does is the idea is that every kind of organism has what we call carbon-14 in them. When they die, the kind of carbon-14 starts to kind of diminish and decay. All right. So the less carbon-14 an item has, the older it is. All right. So in the video, it would have talked about they found these mummies in Peru, a culture called the Cherubaya, which kind of predates the famous Inca civilization. And they determined from the coca leaves that were with that mummy that was buried with it that the mummy lived anywhere between 1300 AD, 1300 and 1400. It gave it within a 100-year period. So it doesn't give it always exact. The less carbon-14, the less exact. Now you got to keep in mind too, if let's say somebody found your remains and it was 1,000 years since you're buried, and they determined that you lived between 1920 and 2020, your story, as they would kind of frame it, may not always be accurate. 1920 into 2020, although there were both pandemics at those times, the way of life was substantially different. All right. So it's not always exact. And that's the thing with prehistory. It isn't always exact. All right. So, like I said, the first item they used radiocarbon dating on was actually a boat that was from Egypt. And they used the wood from that boat, and they were able to determine that the boat was built during a period called the New Kingdom era. All right. So that was the first time it was used. Here's a graph on kind of basically the kind of carbon-14, all right, in which they the video would have showed you they had this kind of thing that kind of separates C14 from nitrogen-14. All right, so I'll show you guys maps, graphs, and charts kind of throughout the course because they give you good visuals, and I watch the MTVs. I know you guys are into trap music, chewing gum, chocolate milk, and maps, graphs, and charts. All right. So I can't give you the other three, but the last one I can do all day, a day. All right. And then another kind of form of dating. Sorry about that. Another form of dating would be called potassium argon dating, which is primarily for geological material, mainly. But it can go a little bit further. Same kind of concept there. All right. The separation of potassium. All right. This was the dating method that was used to essentially determine the age of the Grand Canyon. So mainly, like when we're talking about on Tuesday, which will start the first set of notes on human evolution, a lot of the kind of early discoveries would be using potassium argon dating, all right, particularly like the ones pertaining to the classification of humans, all right, in the sense that potassium argon dating was used for the items that were kind of like where these fossil remains were buried in that. So I was going to show you a video on the Iceman, but it won't play. But it would just show you like basically how they came to the conclusion what happened to the Iceman. There's always some new like information that comes about the Iceman. This is what Ötzi looked like when he was discovered in the Alps there. All right. And he's in a museum in Austria. Italy and Austria actually had a little dispute over where he was actually discovered there in the Alps between the two countries. And so they've determined that he was probably, in the video would have talked about this, initially they thought he was a shepherd, but the anthropologists that did basically a recreation of what was found with him, the shoes and stuff like that, determined that the shoes weren't good for climbing into the mountains for shepherd, to being a shepherd. So what they determined, he was probably ostracized from a small group, and he was probably shot in the back with an arrow. All right. And so that's, and they've done, like I said, they come out with every few years kind of new findings on his, like, what actually happened to him, but they believe that he was probably murdered. All right. So it's really our first kind of real, like, kind of murder mystery, if you will. He looks a little bit like a big chicken. All right. So, do you guys get this?
Yeah.
Those 3 people that are awake?
Yeah.
I appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to try to kind of get they're trying to fix my HDMI here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to post anything tomorrow. Monday, I'll post a kind of a worksheet that will kind of lead us into the section on evolution. All right.
Can we watch the video about this?
Did you watch it?
No, can we?
I'll try to find one. I'll send it out for you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had one from Discovery. It's just like if I would have had it on the smart board, I would have showed it to you. So I'll try to find one. I'll post it on Google Classroom, and you can watch it when you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting if I can find it. And so, but yeah, I'll try to post that.
Okay.
All right. So does anybody have any questions or any concerns? You guys okay with this? This is kind of how we're going to do it. We're on remote. I'm going to try to get my HDMI cord fixed, but we'll see.
Honestly, I feel this kind of works better than just viewing the board through the camera.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So we may mix it up a little bit. So it all depends. But all right. So let's see. All right. Let's close this out. All right. So I will send out an assignment on Monday. All right. And I'm going to try to get grades in tomorrow, give you just a little idea on what you got. If you could send these notes back, send them into me as a grade. I'll send them back to you so you can have them for the test. All right. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good weekend. And I'll send you some on Monday.
Bye.
See you guys.
Take care.
Take care.